social media. She closely watches Bahujan politics with a feminist lens and is also known for raising her concern about Dalit women's representation in mainstream politics. We also have with us here today Dnyaneshwar. He's a researcher working with Dalit Arthik Adhikar Andolan and has completed his master's from TIS Mumbai. His research interests lie in education, public finance, and anti-caste history. He has worked extensively on issues of higher education and Dalit youth empowerment. Uh, yeah. So, a little bit about Fridays for Future India. We are a youth intersectional movement. We have a few goals. One of them is making environmental education accessible in all learning spaces. Secondly, we want to amplify the voices of those who are the most severely affected by climate change. And thirdly, we want to, of course, hold governments accountable for climate action. Um, yeah, also, just one major thing. I would like to acknowledge that a coalition of youth environmental groups across the country stand in solidarity with the farmers protesting at the borders of Delhi for so many days. So, yes, hi Naneshwar, hi Anjali. Um, if you could just unmute yourselves and uh, yeah. Also, guys, all the questions are towards the end. Initially, we have a few questions for our guests. They'll answer them, and you can keep dropping in your questions in the chat box. They'll take those up towards the end.
Hi, Shrejani. Yeah. So thanks Friday for Future and a National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights for giving this very meaningful opportunity. I'm really grateful about it. As you have already talked about the issues that we are contemporary facing, I am also in support of it. I am with the solidarity of um, farmers, and at the same time, there are few issues that we have been facing currently from the government side, that the scholarships that has been going through tremendous conditions, and as well as the current notification that the TISS Mumbai has presented, that they are not going to allow the reservation policy to be implemented into the enrollment processes. So we are also in solidarity with Dalit and Adivasi students. Yeah.
Anjali, would you like to say something before I start with the questions?
Thank you, Srijani. And yeah, even I am in solidarity with the farmers' protest, and I think it is very important for everybody to speak up for their rights and to speak against the ill practices or all the injustices that the government has imposed on us or the marginalized sections, or to subjugate people and to impose their sort of dictatorship. Like, we all know what the country is going through right now, and resistance is power. So yeah, we stand in solidarity with the farmers protest, and really looking forward to hearing and talking about our issues and the climate justice. Thank you.
Completely agree with both of you. Also, guys, you can drop in your questions and anything you want to say. Let's make it as interactive as we can. Anything you want to add in or anything in the chat box below. So I'll start with my first question. I think the first basic one would be, what can the youth environmental movements in the country learn from the Dalit Lives Matter movement and vice versa? Anjali, you
Okay.
can go first and then Naneshwar.
Yeah. So, what we observed in Dalit Lives Matter, um, see, first of all, it in a country like ours, where we believe that untouchability or caste practices are no more in real life, or no more practiced in real world. Dalit Lives Matter was a movement which again took into consideration the fact that caste practices are a reality, and it is very important for people to understand that until and unless we acknowledge that Dalits are being suppressed and their lives are being taken away just because of their caste, nothing changes. Similarly, when we talk about youth environmental movements, it is very important to keep caste as a very important aspect of it. We often forget it because marginalized sections and marginalized communities are the most affected by disasters, by floods, by climate change, or by anything, so Dalit lives matter, and youth environmental movement should work hand in hand, keeping in mind that the socio-economic condition of downtrodden people is bad, and they are the most affected people. So I think their health and the upliftment of those people should be the prime motive of any movement, keeping in mind whether it's about climate or disasters or floods or even pandemic. So we know how the lower castes are suffering these days. They have lost their jobs. They don't have capital, socio or economic or political, whatever. They have no capital. So yeah, this is what I think. Like both the movements have to go hand in hand. Justice sorry This environmental movements have to learn that caste is a very important aspect, and Dalit lives matter movement also has to acknowledge that climate justice and disaster justice is also part of anti-caste movement. We often forget while talking about untouchability, while talking about casteism, while talking about caste system, we often forget that disaster is also included and our people are affected the most in disasters. So yeah, this is what I think. Over to you, Nan.
Yeah, thank you, Anjali. I think I agree with each and every point that Anjali has spoke about. And I'll be speaking really slowly. That I know that interpreters are going to get a lot of problems. So I'll speak really slowly. So as far as climate change is concerned, I think we have to understand first that climate change is not a problem of one particular community or one particular caste or an individual, per se. So it is a global problem. Everybody is going to affect by it. Everybody is going to get problems out of it, and I mean, it is not going to leave anyone behind. If the human life is going to extinct, then it will extinct wholly. Not, I mean, upper caste or the capitalist section also are not going to leave. So that is one thing. Second is, when we look at these two different movements, the environmental movement or the Dalit movement per se, not specifically Dalit Lives Matters, but Dalit movement in general per se, they are both leading towards a same objective or same vision, that the society has to be more human in nature, more more towards natural justice and everything. So that is the common goals that we are focusing on. The distinctions are definitely are there. So what I see is that we need to understand each other. That is the first thing. When I analyze environmental movements in India and globally, then I see that most of the environmental movements, let's say Greta Thunberg's movement or the other movements that has been happening throughout the history, are being very centric to the west. Or if it is in India, then it is very centric to the northern belt. It is not really coming down, or it is not really going to the different sections. So what I see is that it has to be decentralized properly. So it has to be go to each and every region, it has to go to each and every community, and it has to be acknowledged by each of these communities. There has to be a representation, there has to be participation, active participation of all the communities. That is one thing. As far as the knowledge systems are concerned, let's suppose say environmental justice as a knowledge hub, if we consider, then it has to be looked from multiple ways, multiple perspectives. Okay, so there are many voices that are coming from the south, specifically looking at Adivasi voices. So let's say decolonization is one of the major voice that is coming out, that the societies or this climate issue is wholly, or partially connected to the something called colonization. So it has to be decolonized properly. The knowledge system has to be decolonized. um, and when it comes to Dalit lives or Dalit the knowledge system per se, I think it is not only it doesn't only has to decolonize, but it has to be de-Brahmanize also. Or per se, de-Brahmanize, what I mean by de-Brahmanize is it has to have anti-caste, perspective into it. So that's what I think it has to be adopted by environmental movements. There are many things that we can speak about, how gradually we will definitely speak about each and everything. But you can see that recently many climate change is getting worse and worse, as you people are very expert in it, and I have also been reading about it. So it has been increasing day by day. So this knowledge system, how it can be decentralized, is that as Paul and Bina also said in the last session, how these knowledge system can be decentralized in such a way that
Naneshwar?
I think his connection dropped. I hope he comes back.
Okay. So should we like wait for him
Yeah,
or
can we wait just 1 minute? Wait.
yeah?
It's also like break for the interpreter. Try. I think he dropped, so maybe until he rejoins, we can move on to the next question.
Question? Yeah. I think this gave all us climate activists a lot of food for thought that how can we facilitate this process of mutual learning. So, moving on to the next question connected to the mutual learning part, how do you think climate justice movements in India can be truly inclusive of Dalit, Bahujan, and Adivasi people?
So, Srijani, like we all know, the basic problem is that the voices of lower castes or marginalized sections is not given a platform. So, until you ask a person, let me give my yeah, let me use my name as an example. So, being a Dalit, I've been relatively economically from a fine family, I would say. So if there is a disaster, I would not be affected as much as a person, a Dalit person, from a weaker section, from economically weaker background would face. So it is very unfair for us to like have platforms and speak for them. So to make any platform inclusive, we must ask those people, we must bring their voices to the platform and let them speak of their real issues, what they face, how they cope up with it. So yeah, to make the platform inclusive, this is a very important point. Also, uh, I think it is very important to conduct seminars in rural places so that real voices can be brought up from grassroots levels. Any person belonging to an urban section would, even if they are from economically weaker section, would face different problems considering they have good infrastructure and the surroundings around them, the environment around them is different compared to a person living in a rural area. So yeah, this is what I think about it, making the plans inclusive and bringing the real voices in forefront.
Thank you, Anjali. So we'll go back to Naneshwar. I think he has joined back. Hi, Naneshwar. Could you continue your point? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm really very sorry. Apologies for there was a network lag at my end. So no problem. Now it is sorted out now. So Is it the same question or there is a different question now?
Yeah,
I
go
think,
ahead with your
yeah,
question. You can answer,
definitely.
and then I'll ask you the next question.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you so much, Srijani. So I was telling you about the knowledge systems that exist in Dalit and Adivasi communities and the movement per se. And I was also suggesting Dalit movement. I mean, not suggesting, but we already have a lot of voices coming out from the Dalit movement who are talking about environmental justice. For example, let's suppose say there are many books like Suraj Engde's book, or Pradnya Mongla's book, and there are other theorists who have been speaking slightly, not specifically about environment, but partially or some or the other. So this element has always been there, but I think it has to be highlighted more. So I'm telling not just to Dalit movement, but I mean not just to environmental movement, but also to the Dalit movement. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot. So, our next question was that how can the youth environmental justice movement in India be truly inclusive of Dalit Adivasi people?
I think Anjali will go first, maybe.
So, Anjali was done answering.
Okay,
You were
has
waiting for
already
her.
done. Okay. So the inclusion of Dalits and Adivasi, or maybe let's say Dalit Adivasi, or any other marginalized sections into this environmental justice movement is has to be done with few things. One is that the representation is really important. That whether the environmental justice movement does have the representation from these communities. Second, the acknowledgement or the recognition to the knowledge that they have, or um, in the planning or in the programming processes, are they really involved? Are they, have their point has been taken or not? That is really important. So this is a very specific thing. More than that, what I see is that the whole aspect of environmental justice, as Paul has also told about and Bina is also told about, but specifically looking at Dalit youth's point of view and environmental justice. So environmental justice or environmental movements has to not to be like, they have to be very very what to say, very keen or very effective when it comes to um, caste based discrimination, or the whole narrative shouldn't be caste blind or gender blind per se, not just gender of gender is not an homogeneous category. So Dalit women ka perspective should be get involved. And then of course the indigenous communities and the you know uh, seasonal migrants and everything, their voices has to be involved in this whole discussions. Putting it into the different perspective, what I see is that environmental justice movements, they do recognize few of the points of what anti-caste movement talk about. So when I was in TRSS, we used to have this course called disaster and caste. Okay, but when it comes to action, there is nothing. Okay, so you recognize sometime, you recognize caste really influence the disasters or environmental problems, but is it really going into the policy interventions? Is it really going into the budget that is going to be there for disasters? Or is it going to are their voices are coming into the document that you are preparing, or that the document that you are going to give to the home ministry for the disaster management? So that has to be included into the demands that we youth, we young environmental activists propose to the government, or propose to the different governments of the nations. Yeah, that's what I see.
Thank you so much, Dnyaneshwar and Anjali, because yeah, we are also, I think, learning to consciously include the voices of marginalized sections and just go beyond, just including the voices and converting them into actual policy action. So, going into onto the next question, it's a little different from this, but did you have access to environmental education when you were young, and like was it different from mainstream environmental education? Because honestly, I was very dissatisfied with the kind I received. So
Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
Naneshwar, you can go and then Anjali can go.
Okay. As far as the need of environmental education is concerned, it is very much important, and it is not just important for knowledge building. Okay, it is very important. Knowledge building also happens, but it is more of a survival question, right? So, if you want to survive in upcoming years, then you have to have environmental knowledge. Otherwise, how you will be survived? So that is one thing. And my experience of um, gaining environmental education is a little bit different. So I was enrolled in a government school of a village called Tokode of Malegaon. So Malegaon, you might have idea about the Malegaon bomb blast and everything. So I was living near to that place, and so we had a government schools. Honestly, I don't remember anything of what I learn from this education ka course, because first time we had this course in my fifth class, not even in fourth class. And we were supposed to have some projects. So projects will be like, you have to write information of five flowers or five animals, and then you need to submit that, and then you will get the marks. So it was just a theory or theoretical knowledge, which is why I think I don't remember any of it. But it would have been, if it would have been a activity based knowledge, or it would have been a let's say some trip or something like that, or some nature, going to the nature and learning things, or so that way it was not there. So that one experience. But apart from it, I must tell you one thing, that apart from the school, we had separate access to know about nature. Okay, so I born and brought up in a very small agricultural family. So we used to go to the field, we used to work with my family, my father and mother, and we used to, they used to teach us how one particular things grow, how one particular things, how we can use different crops into different, meals and everything. But it was not a formal education, obviously. So, and it was just very basic. As far as climate change is concerned, we didn't have any idea until and unless I enrolled in TISS for my master's course. So let's just consider that you don't get any formal knowledge about climate change until and unless you enroll into the masters or something like that. Okay, so that is my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So, shall I go?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, unlike you, I've studied in a very in in a good school, like the most reputed one in the town, and unfortunately, even we were not given any knowledge about environment or climate. Uh, Only thing that would happen in the name of climate or environmental movements was making posters about saving water and and not cutting trees, and then putting them into annual exhibitions, and then children would get awards. But there was no learning, so it was all on posters. And apart from that, what would happen was, annually they would plant a tree, and they would behave like they've saved the entire planet. So yeah, of course there was no formal education about environment and climate. And what I believe is, see, the first education that a child gets is at home, is with their family. So it is very important for any family to inherit into their children, from a very young age, the importance of being very sensitive towards the nature, towards the environment. Um, and of course the education programs that definitely need some changes, because a child is the future teacher of their family. So educating a child means you're going to educate a family, and the family is going to educate their children further. So putting environmental education into school curriculums is like preparing children for the future survival, because we very well know what in what condition we are in today, in what condition the climate is in today. So yeah, this is what I believe.
I just wanted to include some points, like, because the question was very subjective. But I also want to say that we were, specifically me, because I was very lucky to get this school education. Okay, so many friends of mine who were my classmates during my primary schools, they couldn't continue their schoolings. So school education of Dalit youth at the age of, let's say secondary education or higher secondary education is a challenge altogether. So when we talk about environmental education, actually the Dalit and Adivasi youth or other marginalized communities, the youth from those communities are even not getting the education, and even I mean even if they are like enrolled in schools, then they don't have access to resources, like they don't have books, or they don't have uniforms or something like that. The scholarship that they get, let's suppose a pre-matric scholarship, since I've been working on budgets. Okay, so if we see that the 2018 ka budget, it was just like it was 700 crores, and now it is like 350 crores. So the school education ka budget is reducing, and when it comes to scheduled caste subplan and scheduled tribe subplan, it is getting reduced again. So access to education for Dalit and Adivasi youths in a broader perspective, if we just intersect economics into this whole discussion of environment, it becomes more difficult for Dalit Adivasi children. Yeah.
Thank you. Um, we are gonna have one final question before we move on to like the larger discussion where everybody can get involved.
Mhm.
Um, so the question is, there are numerous conversations on envisioning a just, equitable, and sustainable future and acting towards it. What is that vision for Dalit youth? We understand that lived experiences and visions are different, but to you, what does a sustainable future look like?
Yeah, I think Anjali should speak first. Yeah.
Yeah, you should go first. Nana is
Okay,
waiting for you
great.
to speak. Yeah.
Great. Okay. uh I think because this panel is on youth, no, so there are many things that I decided to speak about as far as youths of Dalit youths are concerned. And since you told that this is the last question, so I should actually bring those topics into it, because I see those problems are really important and those points are really important. So just give me 5 minutes and I'll just finish all these points. Okay. So just look at the demography of this whole uh, concept of youth within Dalit movement, okay, and youth within India as a major periphery. So the latest report by Vadana Todo, I guess, their report is on We the People. So they say that the India is the youngest nation in the world. So because almost 65% of the population of India is below 35 age, and within that, 27% of those youths are between the 15 to 29 age. And if you look at Dalits, so within the total population, 201 millions are Dalits, and then 104 millions are Adivasis. And there is no official data for the NTDNT and semi and denotified tribes, but it is estimated that they are around 180 millions. So if we look into the larger perspective and come just collating Dalit, Adivasi, minorities, Yanti, DNT, disabilities, those marginalized communities into one, then it becomes that more than half of these youths are from these sections, or more than half, let's say 60% or more than that. So that way, the total population, out of this total population, more than 40% are marginalized youths from the marginalized communities. So that is one thing. That background has to be there when we are, pointing out with something called environmental justice movement and looking into the youth from the marginalized communities. Secondly, yesterday, I think, sorry, last session, Beena and Paul has already emphasized on the social structure that we have in our society, how caste system works, how Chaturvarna is there, and so on and so forth. Because they've been working since like 25 years now, so they have major idea about it. But because my academic training is in Dalit and Adivasi studies, I would emphasize on one point, we need to, when we are talking about environment, and we also look into the physical nature of India, the geographical nature of India, we need to see that how society exists in this physical nature. So if we look into the settlements that we have, if, let's say if it is like Dalit settlement, sorry, the rural settlement or urban settlement, or let's say semi-urban or semi-rural settlements, if we look on these settlements from an ethnographic perspective or the ontological perspective, let's say, so you can see that most of the rural areas are, you can see a very similar pattern in all of these villages. So in the core of all the villages, there will be some religious institutions, and the dominant caste groups will be the core of any village. And out of that core, in a circular motion, there will be like trading castes, trading castes, and out of these trading castes, there will be Dalits. So Dalits are either at the boundaries of the periphery of village or separate from the villages. So if any disaster or any climate change which is happening, it is going to affect Dalits, or um, uh, those communities who are living in a vulnerable positions or vulnerable geographical conditions or lowland areas. So it is about rural settings. Same way, urban settings also, you can see that most of these communities are living near the dumping grounds or near the railway stations or in these slums that has been that has been growing. By the way, these slums, if you see the proportion of slums that we had during 90s, and now if you just look at them, the population is growing. Okay, not the geographical area is not growing, but the population is growing. So though these two areas, we need to locate these communities properly so that we can understand that they are more prone to the disasters. And definitely, Paul and Bina has already talked about access to resources, that they don't have access to resources because most of these communities and youth specifically are involved in small and marginal farmings. If you look into the planning commission ka data on land, it is only the proportion of Dalits in the ownership of land is very disproportionate. Even it is like it is I mean, only I think 5 to 6% are in the above marginal farming, and like let's say 10 to 15% are in the small and marginal farming. Most of the Dalit youths and Dalit communities are involved in agricultural laborers, daily wage laborers, and even the buildings that we see outside. So construction workers, sanitation workers. If you see the famous quote of Bejwada Wilson was that every Dalit is not a sanitation worker, but every sanitation worker is a Dalit. That way. So sanitation worker, or and the very small population, we talk about reservation and affirmative action a lot, and we just bombard about it, but if we look into the proportion of Dalits within this government posts or education or let's say corporate, to there is no reservation also. They are very I mean, they are very small. Okay, so like Thorat also says in Dalits in India in his 2009 ka report, that very little amount of number of Dalits are involved in it. So that way I wanted to give that background. That's okay. So now I'll come to your question now about what is the just society that we live in. I think so we need to, all the environmental activists actually have to um, paste that quote of Baba Saheb Ambedkar into their walls. That if you ask me what is the idea of ideal society, then I would say that it has to be based on equality, fraternity, and liberty. So that is also our way of looking into the egalitarian society, and I think we are also leading towards it. But it needs a proper practice. It needs a proper building. It needs a proper um, what to say, processes to lead towards, right? And as you said, I think vision and lived experiences are different, but I would say it is with I don't want to get into the philosophical discussion whether they are different. But I want to resist it. I want to actually say that they are not different. You need to have vision from your lived experiences. So for Dalits, it is very unfortunate to say, but Dalits, mostly Dalits Dalits are voicing against the anti-caste movements and not any other movement. I mean, very little population who is really anti-caste, but Dalits, because they are living into it, right? So their vision of breaking the caste is because of their lived experiences, right? So because they live it. So for environmental justice movement also, it comes from the lived experiences of Dalits only. Okay. So what our vision is that we need to have a um, very participatory processes of all the environmental actions that we do. There has to be representation, and it doesn't have to be, as I said before also, it doesn't have to be an ideal. It has to be realistic in nature. Okay, so you're giving this position to the Dalit youths and Dalit activists and Dalit communities largely. And as Babas have also said in the last speech of giving constitutions, that India needs a social democracy. So if you want to really understand the Dalit problem, then you need to have a social democracy within the environmental movement. Okay, so we need to have a social democracy within the environmental movement. Then only we can lead towards the equitable and egalitarian society. That's what I see. So not just political representation, or me speaking in this webinar, it is not enough. So we need to have very strong participatory methods where we can just reflect whether we have social democracy, whether we have economic democracy, whether we have political democracy. So that's what I think would be an egalitarian society. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have taken a lot of time. Yeah.
No, thank you. That was super insightful and really, really important. So, and
Okay.
this is the space for you to discuss all of this. So, yeah. Anjali, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, so before I answer this question, I would like to put in front of you a few statistics. So I read a report from IDSN, and they did a study in Tamil Nadu about a flood that happened in 2005, I think. So the statistic says that 92% of livestock damage happened to Dalits, and house damage, 95% of the house damage that happened during the floods were of Dalits. Okay, and 86% of crop damages happened to Dalits. Also, 90% of the injuries that happened during the flood were of Dalits. So, do you see the statistics? Whenever there is a disaster, the most affected section of the society are Dalits. And also, uh, yeah, in a country like India, so discrimination happens by default because you never have a choice to choose your caste. If you had a choice, you would never be a Dalit, or you would never choose to be a part of an untouchable community, because you know what you're going to face, and because you know that a lot of your social reputation would depend on what caste you belong to. So yeah, during a disaster, the scarcity of resources are naturally taken away because the upper castes of that area have complete access to it. So when upper castes have access to all the resources in a particular place, especially during a disaster, it becomes very tough for Dalit communities to deal with it. For instance, I was talking to this young girl. She was 20, I think. We were doing some case studies, and she's from UP. So we were talking. So during Corona, during COVID times, there was some ration that was distributed from the government to I think for economically weaker sections. And just because they were Dalits, and because the mother was widow, so obviously in this patriarchal society, widow women are seen with a very bad eye, and thought of bringing unfortune and jinxing things. So yeah, obviously. So they were not even given the ration that was distributed by the government for the people who cannot afford it. Why? Because they belong to the lower castes. They were untouchables. So yeah, that what happens when upper castes have access to it. Also, scarcity of resources during natural disasters lead widens the gap between availability of things among lower castes and upper castes. For example, when we talk about women, in particular Dalit women, they do not have access to sanitary things. They face many problems, from a lack of sanitary towels during menstruation to sexual violence in camps and poor health care for expectant mothers. Also, as a result, maternal and infant mortality rates and infectious diseases are fueled because of poor sanitation. So during disasters, Dalit women do not have access to clean and sanitary processes. So they are often exposed uh, to infectious environments. So there is a high mortality of Dalit women, especially young girls and mothers who've just given birth. And also, I would add into this, since we've not talked about disabled people. So disabled people are also disproportionately affected by disasters. Many cannot physically access buildings or transport or even relief camps, and it becomes very tough to provide aid to them, because most of the times their statistics or their data is neglected. So our 2013 report found many Dalits do not get access to emergency aid, even like clean drinking water or food rations or shelter. And when disabled people are from Dalit communities, it becomes even tougher for them, because they have to go through different layers of discrimination, different layers of disabilities, uh, and also so when a person so I don't think I'm in a position to talk about disabled people, because I'm this is not my expertise, and also because we don't hold that position that we would speak on their behalf. I think we better have an inclusive platform so we can hear them speak. Yeah, so I think disabled people get very adversely if affected during any pandemic or disasters. Talking about lower caste communities, there was a report which said that when there was a flood in Sri Lanka in 2004, when tsunami happened, food was refused to Dalits in a relief camp. And while that same disaster happened in India, Dalits were exploited for their labor to remove corpse and debris. So systematically, Dalits have been the labor of Dalits have been misused, or I would say Dalits have been exploited for free labor during disasters. And also, the least Dalit women are on a pedestrian or on a level where the relief reaches them the least, or they don't even come forward with their problems. They do not talk about problems, because menstruation in India is a taboo, and it affects every woman, like every woman. And still a bleeding girl, a girl going through her periods, would never come forward and say that, I am in a very bad condition, I need this help. When government treats the basic necessities as luxuries, it becomes impossible for lower caste communities to have access to it. So yeah, I think this is what I want to say about it.
Thank you, Anjali, for bringing light to those topics that we often don't connect to climate justice or like the crisis. So thank you for bringing that to light. Um, we are now open to questions. This is now an open discussion, but we're just gonna take a 1 minute breather for the interpreters, so that they can take a break, and then feel free to ask your questions in the chat or raise your hand. And we also have a bunch of questions on our YouTube live stream, so I'm also going to take a look at that. Okay, this is a really long question in the chat box, so I'll read it out loud, but also, speakers, please take a look at it.
Okay.
Okay, so the question is, wait, interpreters, can I go on or do you want me to wait? Okay, Laksha is good. Okay. Okay. First, I want to thank the speakers and the organizers for this wonderful and educational experience. My question starts with the observation that climate change is not only an environmental problem we have, there is also biodiversity loss and the consequences of land use change. Climate is, of course, the accelerant of all these issues. What is underneath this complex crisis? What is underneath this complex of crisis is our current economic and social system, which is based on a developmental model that requires inequality and thereby exacerbates current and historic inequality. And yet, we are told that we need to continue on this path of neoliberal development in order to bring prosperity to marginalized people. We are told that simply substituting our technologies with green energy is sufficient to solve the climate problem so business as usual can continue. How can we reimagine development that takes care of human needs for everyone? Okay, so now we come to the question. How can we reimagine development that takes care of human needs for everyone and also respects all ecological and planetary boundaries?
So should we answer it or should we wait for more questions? Or
We can wait for more questions. There was another on our YouTube. We had a bunch of questions about development and environment, similar to this question. Um, One person asked how we can reduce population in Delhi. Sorry, pollution. Um, um, One question is explain. Do we have a particular solution for disabled people to come out from worse situations? But as Anjali rightly said, we should get someone from their community to come and answer those questions. Nyan, somebody wants you to comment further on education and what the future looks like at the current policy rate. So these are the questions, so we can go one by one. And also, after all of that, if people want to share their comments or questions, they can also do that.
should I go now?
Yes.
Okay. Miss Vandana's thing, I guess. Yeah. The reflection is really good actually, and it covers almost all the crux of the problem, of environmental justice. You can just say that. And but she specifically mentions the how we can just reimagine the development, and where everyone's needs will be fulfilled. So thanks for really good reflection, Vandana ji. What I want to say is that um, development per se as a concept or as a theory is really is a domain of privilege, or is a domain of elites. Okay, so you need to see a development from a different perspective, listen to different voices, listen to different communities, listen to different, you know, and different sections of society. Then only we can reimagine it. Only people from environmental justice movement or people from Dalit movement could not answer that question. So reimagining is what I see is that reimagining is just collating all those voices into one and come up with some brighter solution. Not brighter, bright is a racist word, but in a more inclusive solution, so that we can just move forward. And I can just give you the point of view or the perspective from Dalit movement. So what I see, development is that development has to be centralized, not just to the as you said, neoliberal concepts of markets or anything else, but it has to be more towards the welfare, the welfare economics that we have been talking about. So like what Thorat also says, that the whole discussion of economic development has to be centered to the social development of communities, or the social transformation of the communities that is really needed. So we cannot have a discussion on development until and unless we just collate all those voices into in an inclusive discussion. For Dalit, it'll be the access to resources, access to policies, access to budgets, access to let's suppose say land. There are movements on lands, there are movements on access to public entitlements. And it'll be a really hurry if we just think of finishing development in 2025 or 2030 or something like that. It is not a it will not need a small span. It'll take a huge time. But while thinking about the vision of a huge thing, we need to start off with a few really small things, so that if government gives a lot of sufficient resources as per the constitution says, or as per the policy interventions that has been happening to say, then it will gradually change. We need to insert the voices of all sections into this policy intervention, so that it will gradually develop. That's what I see. Yeah.
Thank you. Anjali, do you want to answer?
Yeah. So, if I talk about sustainable development and preserving our environment and climate, I think the best techniques and the actual mantra to saving the environment, the scheduled tribes of India has it. So, Adivasis in India have preserved and protected the nature in the best way. They have fought for it, they have kept it alive, they are still fighting for it, and they have kept our nature in the way it was. I mean, if you look at their culture, so for example, even when Adivasi, the scheduled tribes, the tribal people, they go for hunting, they never kill the mother, so that the cycle doesn't disturb. So I really would like to summarize into this one line: if we really want to learn about the preservation of nature and environment, we need to learn it from the tribal people, the tribal communities.
Yeah, there was one more question on the education part, right? Sorry,
Sorry,
I
I
forgot to. Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
sorry.
Anjali.
Yeah,
Anjali,
no,
you can go.
no, I thought you were asking me. You
No,
can.
no. There was one more question on education. Sorry, I forgot talking about it. Then, let me just give you very few points about on education. That how do we look at education from a perspective of Dalits or Adivasi? Not Adivasi, because there are different sections, and there are different movements. There are different theories, different approaches that we should be very keen to learn about. Okay, and we should always listen to the voices from Adivasi communities. So education per se from a Dalit community ka perspective. So there's something called perspective from within and perspective from below. Okay. So how do we build education? How do we build education within communities? Like, for example, um, um, so we need to build education systems from the community, not from the upstairs. Like, it has to come from the bottom. It has to be a bottom up perspective. So for Dalits, it'll be like how to be very skillful about different things that are going on around the world, like having knowledge about entrepreneurship, having knowledge about um, businesses, having knowledge about corporate sections, having knowledge about their, everything that is going in the world. But the major problem with Dalits is that they don't have access. So government or environmental justice movement should just advocate to get access to education to Dalits. As we grow, as we gradually move forward, then it'll be strengthened. They will build, or they have already built their own knowledge systems. There has to be alternative disciplines which they will be building if they get the access to education. So majorly, how education should be is really a next level problem. What problem primarily that Dalits face in India is that whether they are getting access to education or not. That's what I think right now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's we have a couple of questions in the chat. So again, there are three questions from Aditi. I'll read all of them out, and then you can. I think they're all related. So it is not enough merely to have voices heard. We need representation and policy making both for urban and rural planning. The whole idea of sustainability is looked at from a very urban privileged lens. How to be more inclusive? That's the first question. The second question is, would it be useful to include indigenous people in ecosystem studies and include Dalit and Adivasi citizens in developmental planning of those specific areas? And the final question, so EIA, environmental impact assessment, should focus more on including Dalit and Adivasi knowledge than on how land systems can be utilized and changed. This would require systematic representation of Dalit and Adivasi communities within the policy making bodies. So, yeah, if you want to comment.
Yeah, Anjali.
Uh, yeah. So I've already spoken about it. I think that we speak from a very privileged position, and to counter this problem, we really need to bring voices from the grassroots level, and passing the mic is the only solution to this. You bring people to the platform, you give them spaces from where they can speak, from where they can raise their problems, and only when you listen to problems from real places, you can have solutions to them. It is very tough, it is very say it is very generalized for us to speak about problems that we've only heard of, that we've never faced, that we've never seen from our own eyes. And it is very important to differentiate between urban and rural development, considering that there are actually different sections of society. When you think about development, it is very important to keep in mind that rural and urban setups are different, and the lifestyle and the living standards of people are different. And yeah, obviously we should listen to them, just listen to them. Inclusiveness can only be sorted out by giving people the platform.
Yeah, I think Anjali has already talked about. So I think while speaking about representation, we might have mistaken that we just spoke about voices, but definitely the physical representation is really needed. Moreover, my experience while working in NCDHR as a research associate, we have been working with Panchayat Raj institutions. We've been working with the ward systems at urban settlements, the experiences is like that. Even though they have political representation, the representatives have their political representations, but it is not, the community at large or society at large, because of the caste system, they are not able to access those rights or effectively implement their power. Okay, so we need to come up with some solutions where that they can also use this power, or they can use their positions in a more effective way. uh, as far as the movements are concerned, like environmental movement is concerned, the representation has to be the same way effective. You have to give not just a representation as the body, like you're giving space to one person, but give them the, the glass ceiling has to be broke, has to be broken by the whole movement itself. So yeah, the physical representation is important, and their voices has to be included in the demands, into the major narrative, into the knowledge systems that the environment justice movement follows. Yeah, so it doesn't have to have only a representation of people, but it has to be a representation of the whole what to say, discourse. Yeah, that's what I see. Thanks for those questions. They were really interesting questions. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question. So, as young people, what is something we can do, like sitting at home? What is the first step we can take to be like better allies and be more inclusive to each other?
Okay. uh I mean, allies per se, it is more can be like, allies, you can do whatever that you want, like, but not the as Anjali said, you have to pass the mic. Apart from passing the mic, you can just support, mentally, not mentally, but support materially. If you have resources, just transfer those resources. If you have positions, just transfer the positions. You don't have to do anything. Okay, right? So for example, if environment, let's say if Friday for Futures have a movement based, like a movement on environmental, and they are conducting protests in different places. So are you including people from these communities? Are you talking about their issues? Are you letting them talking about their issues in your movement? That's what really means. And as I said in the beginning also, when we talk about solidarity, it is very fascinating that solidarity is very virtual, or very what to say, it's a vocal only, it is not in the practice. The whole system has to be a praxis, so not just theory but action also. That's what I see. While staying at home, what you can do, you can just protect, you can just you can just support them. And when there is need, when there is any Dalit community who is going to who is going to conduct a protest, you should participate in it. You should just raise the slogans behind the Dalit people. So that's what you can do. That's what I can say. Yeah.
I would like to add on to this.
For
So,
sure.
when we talk about allyship, obviously there'll be people who will tell us that you are right, but a true ally is the person who would also call the other person wrong, you know so these are two different aspects of it. Obviously, people will come to us and say you are fighting for a good cause and we are with you and we support you and totally correct and everything, but there are very few of them who would actually go to their families and tell them that you are wrong, you need to change this thing, and and continuously put efforts into actually changing their family, so that they point out problems in other people and they try to change them. So even change is a chain, so you change one person, the one person changes three, and the three changes five. So even that is what is a very important part of allyship, calling the other person wrong.
Thank you. We have a couple of people who want to share things. Um, Before I do that, Lee, you've commented some really good points. Would you like to elaborate on it, like um, by speaking? Because you gave some really good insight in the last webinar too. Can I unmute you? Say yes if you want to comment. Wait,
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So it's been a very enlightening session, and I've been really enjoying listening to both the speakers. Congratulations, Diana and Anjali, to this, and definitely to the organizers for bringing them together. And to your question, what you had asked, although the youth really need to answer this, the panelists need to answer this also, and they have done it. But probably, I would also think that to really what we can do as allies, or how can we really get into a partnership, or what can we do by sitting at home right now to really facilitate the processes to connect with more and more Dalit organizations, networks, youth, and even the non-Dalit organizations that Fridays for Future is associating in India with in different corners of the country. Get them to connect with Dalit networks and organizations and members and people in universities and within the communities. That's how this chain reaction will continue, and it will bring more and more people. Because ultimately, the responsibility, the onus of mobilizing Dalits should not only rest with Dalits in this movement, if we have to reach out to different corners of the country. It has to be shouldered, and it can only happen when we reach out and when Fridays for Future reaches out to its own constituency, its own partners, and makes it mandatory. That their networks, their participation, their children, the young people there should really comprise members from Dalit and I would say Dalit communities, because I do feel still even Adivasi communities that way. In the far flung areas, how inclusive we are, it should really show in the diversity that we can really bring into different levels. Because whenever I see any environmental campaign, and even when I was checking, yeah, sorry. So whenever I see these environmental campaigns, photographs and everything, I just find everything so elite, everything is so urban centered. Everything is so like, with children who are so articulate, so vocal, and they can communicate in various languages. So somewhere I feel that the other section is always missed out, because it takes extra effort to reach out to them and to also empower them. Inclusion is not just getting a head count, which we normally do even within the civil society, a tick box, a check box. Okay, we have these many numbers of Dalits. No, it's not that. Are we really seeing is, and maybe in the future with this kind of a collaboration and association with Fridays for Future, are we really able to assess the impact that we have had by counting of 1 year down the line or 2 years down the line, how many Dalit youth have we raised to speak up on environment issues, on climate issues at different levels, not just local levels, but across levels and international levels as well. So I think that leadership building is very important, and not just having headcount and secured, okay, these many people are there. No, they have to be in the leadership roles in different positions, different committees, be it organizational or be it in committees when we are launching campaigns and various actions that we are doing. So that leadership also brings in a lot of difference, and the perspective then flows into all the actions. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. Yep. Thank you.
thank you. That that is really important, and I hope everyone in the movement takes time to listen to this webinar and those comments, and we can act on it. Um, in like this is just a story that I'm sharing. In April of 2020, we started like our first partnership with Adivasi youth from Jharkhand, and 6 months later, like same way through knowledge sharing and building community and relationships. 6 months later, um, Fridays for Future Jharkhand was formed, and that was the first indigenous chapter in Asia run by Adivasi youth for Adivasi youth, and they've been doing some really, really great stuff. So I hope yeah, after this, this is it. It goes further from this webinar series, and we can also have um, a Fridays for Future working group led by Dalit youth, and make sure that all the decisions that we make, it's more inclusive, because that is what we aim for. But thank you so much for sharing those important points, Lee. Um, Ojit, do you still want to speak? Say yes in the chat if you do. You wrote a paragraph, but it is lost and I can't find it. So if you want to give your comment, okay. But it needs to be quick because we have only 8 minutes left. I'm going to unmute you now.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Extremely sorry. I come from a pure science background, so my introduction to the human side of the ecology and environment is very new. It's very, very interesting. I come from northeastern India, and I'm very, very sorry. Not very sorry. It's a true fact. Many of the people believe that the people living in the northeastern region, or people who are forest people, they protect about the nature. They do consider nature so religious. It's true because it is the livelihood. It is the life, because when there is no other power, when there is no other connectivity, the only connection that they could make is to protect the environment and derive the necessary things from there. So it's a lifeline for them, right? But very interestingly, climate change is impacting in many ways, in the lower productivity, in making the life more miserable. But very, very sadly, when we talk about vulnerables, when we talk about the marginalized, many of the people who are sitting there, situating there, do not know that they are marginalized or they are being labeled as a vulnerable, right? So my only submission to this group is we need a scholar activist. We need people who could listen their story and tell them that climate change is happening in your backyard. And climate change is something which is really happening, and it helps in a very positive feedback mechanism to make them more vulnerable, right? So I see a lot of what to say, lot of opportunity and a lot of good talk and good discussions. Really was humbled by listening good things, because as I say that I come from a pure, my study of the environment is air pollution, sound pollution, and the groundwater pollutions. I never knew that environment that we do is so closely associated to the life in the future and the global security. And yes, we really need the voice of the voiceless. We really need to give an opportunity to raise and say that yes, this is happening in my backyard. So that's what I want to comment. So thank you so much for giving this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ojit. Garvit, you have 4 minutes. I'm going to unmute you now. Do the speakers want to comment on what Ojit just said before I move on to Garvit?
I mean, I totally or partially relate with Ojit, because um, we have not been very active in the northwestern part of India, but I have been so many friends who talk about their families, and then everything about their societies and how is it very connected with the nature, and I want to specifically tell about one of my friend from Sikkim. He used to bring a lot of different types of pickles, which were made of different um, uh, natural things. So that way I know that the society is very much connected to the nature. Secondly, as far as the environmental science as a science is concerned, so it is very restricted to the physical science, or very restricted to the the science which evolves around atoms and everything. But you need to actually include the sociologist aspect into it, the anthropologist aspect in it, so that it could be both science and social sciences together, so that I see into the environmental science as a discipline. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Garvit, you can ask your question now.
So since we deviated a little into education, um, actually, I think I have a question is that we always talk about how the world should look at the Dalits and be encouraged and have faith or hope in them. I mean, yeah, right? But
Mhm.
I was reading a book, Poor Economics by Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee. We all know them, and it said it was a really bad fact to be honest. But so they held an experiment where the government school teachers they were asked to grade exams, okay, and half of them were their names were highlighted, the names were shown, and it was said it is an obviously that they discriminate towards lower caste people, so obviously they got much lower marks than they should have. But what hurt me the most was the fact that the lower caste teachers, right, teachers who come from the lower caste background actually give worse marks than the other people. So
Okay.
it's a hope lost. They've lost hope within themselves, right? So how are you going to encourage them, or how are you going to make them believe in this? Again, it's a fact. I can share here.
Yeah. Thanks, Garvit. I mean, it is a nice question, but it is specifically looking into the education part, and the environment is a different arena altogether, right? And I've also gone through the introduction of the book, Poor Economics. I have my own concerns about the book and the credibility of the book. So maybe we can discuss about it in a different manner altogether. Yes, and that is the only answer I can give now. Yeah.
Um, Anjali and Dhyan, some people who attended the webinar are interested in connecting with you further to take the discussion further. Can I share your email ID with them if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. Definitely.
Anjali, are
Sure,
you okay with
sure,
it?
sure. Do it. Do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
But any more questions? I'm going to conclude. Um, okay. Thank you so much. This webinar was great again. Every session, my brain expands so much more, and I think of so many things that we need to do. And I really hope in the coming year we can do a lot of things and collaborate more. Um, as a movement, something that came to my head was with maybe looking into one step local chapters could take is looking into what are the Dalit organizations that work in their locality and potentially collaborating with them. So that's going to be a project for someone to make a list and then take it further from there. But even though this is we would love to do more sessions just on this youth aspect because it's so important and there are so many different topics we can talk about. So hopefully this is not the last time we see you on our webinars. Thank you so much. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Sri Ranjani. It was really awesome. I mean, the participants were very supportive, and thanks all for listening to us. Yeah,
Thank you, everyone. You were really, really patient with us. And yeah, it was a very insightful session, and I really learned a lot. And I never knew, Nyan, you were this good at